you are listening to the Kinetic Man Podcast. I'm Stuart.
And I'm David, and we want to walk with you on the journey to living a life defined by uncommon action that is full of purpose, adventure, and meaningful relationships. Our goal is to refine our why while helping you find yours, and together achieve our best and highest purpose. In the end, we'll drive each other to leave the potential life behind and become kinetic men.
Men, what's up? Hey, this is Stu, and we have some really big news to share. We believe men deserve more clarity, more challenging conversations, more accountability, more action, more friends, and more impact. See, we started the Kinetic Man to have more. For over 3 years, we have seen the power of intentional men coming together and changing each other's lives. We are beyond excited for you to experience the life-changing potential of these conversations and gatherings. Because of that, because we want more men to join us in this journey, we've lowered the price to $50 a month. That's less than your Disney Plus subscription, Hulu, YouTube, any of those other subscriptions that bring way less value on a weekly basis than the Kinetic Man does. So we'd love for you to join the tribe. If you're ready to take action, use the link below in the show notes of this podcast, or you can go directly to thekineticman.com and smash that join now button and come be different, be better, be a kinetic man. We'll see you soon. Do you think you're a comedian? Is that
I
what
don't
you
think I'm a
think you are?
comedian because I respect the trade and I've not put in the requisite time and effort to hone that skill craft. However, I do think I make funny jokes, and
You think so?
what I just said to you, no exception. It made me giggle.
I didn't think that was very funny.
I thought it was funny. I mean, I couldn't hear you as we were prepping to hit record,
Mm.
and I drew an interesting comfort in that. It was almost like my ears were like, wow, finally, like the voice doesn't have to,
You saw my mouth
we don't have to
moving,
process
but
the
you couldn't hear
voice.
anything.
Yeah. Then my brain was like, whatever is coming out of his mouth is probably dumb. So it's good that we don't have to work to understand what he's trying to
Uh,
say. But it's just a
Jokes.
joke
Got
because you're
jokes.
full of knowledge. You have wisdom. I respect you. I love you. And I pray that I honor you in our friendship. Um, and always have to remember that you're my friend
Mm.
because I choose that you're my friend. And so really, if there's any fault, I would never put it on you. It's on me.
It's on you.
It's my fault.
Taking some
It's
extreme
my fault.
ownership there.
Yeah, extreme ownership.
I like that.
Um, and we have to, and this is not at all in 100% genuine, heartfelt, because I wish you were coming, but we've got to get to the point here because I have a mountain bike ride to get to,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, you can't participate
Yeah, not gonna lie,
because you
I'm a
broke
little jelly.
yourself.
I'm a little
I
jelly.
know. I wish you weren't broken, dude. I really
Me
do.
too.
For real.
Me too.
Get better soon.
Thanks, man.
Well, dude, we were chit-chatting. We wrapped up Intimacy Month. Those people who are return visitors, hopefully you caught that episode on that you and I did on intimacy, and it gave some insight into the things we talked about. But I'll tell you, man, it was pretty fascinating. This was a very impactful month for me. And I think in the context of a couple of conversations we had Chad Hennings on, talked a lot about identity. And so there was a conversation there that kind of, that informed and at least refined my thought process on intimacy, and ownership. And there was, we had Jordan Grummett on, who we talked about big P purpose versus little P purpose. And so all these different conversations, which I think is important, right? I think it's important to, when we talk about reading books or listening to podcasts, or we talk about all these ways we consume information and, quote unquote knowledge. In my mind, that knowledge, that information, that data, unless you do something with it, it never converts to wisdom. And I think wisdom is the goal, right? Just having a lot of data and information, I don't think ever should be the goal. A list of books under my resume that I've read, that's just not. I think we miss out on opportunities when we don't take effort and put it into action and contextualize these things in ways that are important to us, that not only help us grow but serve others. That's when it truly becomes something magical. and you can derive wisdom, and you can be somebody who, quite frankly, is defined by the actions they take, the way they live, because the do is vastly greater than say, right? And
For sure,
so
man.
this month has been interesting for me because in the context of all that, even just presenting ideas and watching dudes within the Kinetic Man kind of be like, not just me presenting ideas, but different folks presenting different thoughts, and watching guys be like, man, huh, that's interesting. I need to think about that. And I received a text today that just completely validated a lot of those conversations. And so I think this would be a good conversation because it shows a process, very practical process in which we are attempting to make these things part of our life, but also exposing yourself to different ideas, different thoughts, and challenging your preconceived notions and whatever your biases against something that maybe you're not necessarily, it may be a blind spot for you, right?
Yeah.
And that blind spot is keeping you from, for most people, from being the person that they want to be anyways. They just don't necessarily, myself included, I just don't necessarily have haven't questioned it in a certain way, or haven't thought of it from a certain perspective. And really, just being completely blunt, you and I had a conversation yesterday that was born out of uh, a desire for both of us. We were both going through a thought process that I don't think we realized until we talked about yesterday, to really honor each other and our friendships with in a more intimate manner. But a lot of times that requires vulnerability and honesty. And sometimes those conversations are very uncomfortable. And I think our conversation started potentially uncomfortable, but it ended well. So there's a lot there, but I think the bottom line to all of it is this month was very impactful with the podcast guests we had, the way they challenged us, but also in the context of intimacy and going through intimacy month within the Kinetic Man.
Yeah, man. It's interesting how it like kind of like all comes together kind of full circle. You know, you're speaking on wisdom and wisdom and action. And I think to your point, um, taking these ideas, taking these thoughts, taking the books, taking the podcasts, taking the comments, taking the reflections, all of that stuff brings wisdom, but I don't think it truly comes in um, until you have that experience, right? Until you take that wisdom and go put it into action and do something, and that could potentially be failing, right? You could try something, it could, you know, you could fall flat on your face, but through the experience, I think is where you even gain more wisdom after you've tried something, after you put something into action, after you've taken an idea, a thought, and you go do it. And what came to mind was, Solomon in the Bible, like there's this thing called the Solomon's paradox where, like, he's claimed to be the wisest dude, and he gave all this advice, but like a lot of times he didn't even follow his own advice. It's like I don't want to be that dude. I don't want to be that guy who like gives out all this wisdom, but then doesn't go really do it myself. And and yesterday we were at the end of our conversation, we gave ourselves an assignment to, take about 8 minutes and write down, brainstorm all the ways that you can show up to be more intimate, right? And maybe put this identity of I'm an intimate father, I'm an intimate husband, I'm an intimate friend. And I just started writing. I started journaling, and I wrote down like all these things that were action items, right? Like I give hugs, I say I love you to more people. I leave love notes for my family. All these things, right? And they were all action items. So I think a lot of times we have to put this identity piece into action, right? And also that could be failing, right? But I think it's still action items of I'm going to take action. I'm going to throw myself out there. Like you said, be vulnerable, be honest. I might fail, and people might see me fail. My family might see me fail. My kids might see me fail. My friends, people on social media might see me fail. But I think that that's where you get to the real piece, the true wisdom, the true experience of finding your identity.
Well, yeah, and I want to, spoiler alert, two things you said. So one is putting identity into action. You're already doing that. It's just most of us do it unconsciously, right? Like we're not choosing the identity that we desire. We have an idea of who we want to be, but we're not actioning that. We've not been intentional in setting up what somebody with that identity does. And so your identity is coming out, right? Like it is manifesting in some way. People are taking notice of who you are. And there's a very interesting conversation within the Connect Man yesterday in the mastermind where one of the guys he was counseling and addressing another dude. And that guy said, well, this is just who I am. This is how I am. And our buddy was like, really? Is that really who you are? Or is
He
that who
called
you
him
choose
out.
to be? Right. Like he called him out straight up, but it had consequences. He said, if you continue if who you are, quote unquote, who you are continues to manifest the way that it manifests, then you will no longer be employed here. Right. Like there was a very real consequence. And that gave that guy pause. What I found fascinating is like, well, if I show up, very cynical guy, apparently really negative, and people are hesitant to engage him. Like it just makes for a toxic work environment. And so that guy, he said, and there were two really interesting points. He said, what if I came in tomorrow and I was like in a good mood and like this is not who I am? And our buddy was like, is it really not? Like it's really you're playing a persona. You're playing a persona. And it's not who you are. You're just choosing to be this thing. And then what I found really fascinating, I never considered this, is our kinetic homeboy was like, and we the group are responsible as well because we feed into it. We call him the grumpy old man. We say we feed into this identity and almost applaud and accept it, but it's all fabricated. It's not just because you let's dig into that. Is that who you truly are? And is that who you truly want to be? And is that who you are at home? Is that who you are with your kids, with your grandkids? Like it's you're choosing a thing and it's manifesting, right? And then he took it to the next level and he went and counseled the other members of the team and like, hey, like here's your responsibility in this too. Like you have to stop doing that. Like you don't get to feed in because the very real ramifications are if you care about this individual, they're gone. They're gonna be gone because this is not how my team works, right? And so it's just a fascinating conversation. So that's one kind of spoiler alert is that the identity that you whatever it is that you have, or at least that you're accepting, whether you choose to or not. And I would challenge you if you say, oh, I'm just a grumpy, like douchey dude. Like if that's like your honest like assessment of yourself and who you want to be, like I would challenge that and be like, really? Like that's who you want to be? That's your goal in life is that you're a grumpy, non-approachable douchey dude. Like that's really like you wake up in the morning and that's what you aspire towards. Like I challenge that, right? And if it is, like let's talk about it because there's probably some hurt and there's some things we can work on. But that aside, so the idea that who you are is going to manifest, just accept that and know that. And with that knowledge, you can now say, I don't want to be that. Or even better, I think the negative aspect is less powerful. The positive aspect is more powerful. I want to be blah blah blah, or I am someone like that exercise you did. I am someone who XYZ, and then you action that, right? You have a list. And then the second spoiler alert is the idea that a failure, you're gonna fail. You're gonna fail. And I would argue you're going to fail. You're gonna be wrong. You're gonna have the wrong opinion. You're gonna make the wrong judgment. You're gonna quote unquote fail vastly more than you quote unquote succeed or win or whatever, right? And I think that's one of the beauties of life. If you go into it and you're like, hey, there's a really good chance my opinion on this is like, there's a good chance that I'm wrong. I did it the other day. I was in a conversation and I, for some reason, remembered way back when we were at the academy that the soup, Admiral Ryan, he has a twin brother, right? For some reason, it was in my head. I remember, and I've not thought about this for years, that while he was a soup, his brother was a general in the Air Force and was potentially in a leadership position at the Air Force Academy. Why that was a thing that I remember, I don't know because it's not true. They both graduated from the Naval Academy.
Yeah.
They're both naval aviators. They're both admirals. And I think I saw a picture of his brother in a flight suit. And in my early years at the academy, I'm like, oh, he must be in the Air Force. I don't know. Just too long ago. I don't remember. But my point is, I was talking about that the other day, and I said it from the context of what I remembered, and I was like, I'm gonna look that up. I'm gonna look that up, and I was totally wrong, and that's okay. But I think that's usually how we are. We're totally wrong, and that's okay. We just don't usually take the step to look it up and figure it out, and then be like, hey, dude, I was totally wrong. Like I totally bombed that one. But there's really no consequence to it, right? Like, and that's what I think most of life is that way. And it's okay. So, like from an identity perspective, is your identity? I'm someone who's always right. If that's an identity, not only is it a false identity, but it's a lie, and it manifests in some very unpleasant ways, and you could counter it like that, right? But you have to want to. And for me, that want to came in the context of how do I become more intimate in my relationships with my wife, my kids, my friends. A big part of that for me is stepping back and be like, dude, I'm wrong all the time, and that's okay. That in and of itself will force you to be a questioner, and questioners are way more um, tolerable, and they're way more welcome into most people's lives than constant advice givers and
Yeah.
opinion providers, right?
Well, your humility and again vulnerability. If you're open to being vulnerable and like letting people see, truly who you are, that's going
Well,
to
and
open
laughing,
up.
right? Being like, wow, that was the dumbest thing yet. Like, I seriously said that these guys were twin brothers. One was in the Air Force and they were both superintendents at the same time. Like, that's just really dumb. Like, that's just not even, that's not fact.
Yeah.
And I can laugh at that, right? Like, oh, wow, what a freaking knucklehead.
Yeah.
Like, I could say something like, man, that's something that Stu would say, right?
Here's, as you're kind of talking, I was thinking about, just like explaining the kinetic man and like the inside baseball of what TKM was all about, in the mastermind. And there's a recipe for like becoming better in whatever area of your life that you want to become better in. And it starts with identity, right? It starts with like defining who you are, defining those values, and that's like the core. That's what we start with. We start with identity and core values and purpose, and you identify that. You figure out who you are. You figure out defining success in the area of your life that you want to grow in. Example, intimacy, and you define, hey, I'm going to be an intimate father, right? And then you list out action items and you execute on those action items, and you have someone that's going to hold you accountable to those action items. And you're going to fail, but you're going to keep on trying. You're going to put them on the calendar. And if you do that and you're intentional with living your life, like you're going to grow. You're going to become better. You're going to become a more intimate father, a more intimate husband, because you're defining what it means. You're putting action items to it. You're calendarizing it. You're being held accountable to it, and you're going to get better for it. It's like that's it. That's the recipe for success, right?
Yeah.
In Kinetic
When it's
Man.
crazy, when you talk about success, like we talk about redefining success.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, recently in a conversation with a Connect man, it's taken me forever to kind of, I've had multiple iterations, but my most recent redefinition of success is all those things you just mentioned. You're gonna fail, you're gonna fall, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do that. Your relationships are gonna suck. All those things. My new definition for success is how quickly do I recover from that? And
It's
and
good.
dude, just having that conversation with it was with Mark Cox via text the other day. it really clarified some things for me and was very helpful in that I was like, we were just chatting about some failures, and I said it to him, but I was saying it to myself, and I was like, hey, it's not about we're gonna fail. It's not about perfection. It's about progressing. It's about the process. But then it hit me. I was like, and it's also how quickly you get up, right? It's how quickly you say sorry, how quickly, because that, if you can continue to shorten that gap, like that for me has become the new definition of success. Like I failed. I'm going to fail again tomorrow. I'm going to fail again probably in 10 minutes. But the gap between failure and getting back on track with the action items that, like you said, you have a list of things that you want to be and do. With that, the quicker I acknowledge the failure and do what I have to do. I'm sorry, Stu. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Whatever, and get back to this and even vocalize it. I messed up. That's not who I want to be. I want to be this guy. And so this is what I'm going to do. The quicker you can do that, dude, to me, that's success now, right? There's nothing in there about not failing because that's just silly. But 100%, it's all about recovery. How quickly can I recover?
Let me hit the unmute button before I start talking. Um, you had mentioned our conversation with Chad Hennings, and we were hitting this identity piece pretty hard with him, and I thought it was impactful for me at least, to hear this in the world of success, from the outside world, like looking at this dude and like very successful, right? He was Air Force Academy grad, he was an A-10 pilot, went on to be, a Dallas Cowboy, Super Bowl champ 3 times, um, and now a successful real estate entrepreneur, investor, and he had all these identities in that, right? He was a Dallas Cowboy, Air Force pilot, um, Air Force Academy grad, and there was this piece where like all of those identities could not do anything about his son's sickness, right? Couldn't do anything. It's like I wanted to hit on this idea of all of these false identities that we find ourselves in as men. I do it too, right? Like I was a Naval Academy grad. I was a Navy pilot. I was a naval officer. I was a commander. I was a whatever the case. I'm a real estate investor. I'm a Texan. And I had this interesting thought last weekend that I was telling you about. One thing I've been doing a lot is volunteering to coach my son's little league baseball team. He's 6, and last weekend he had a great game. Like he made some amazing plays in the field. He hit the ball really well, and he had like best game probably he's had in his little baseball career. And after the game, I had multiple people come up to me, to include my mom, came up to me and was like, "Good game, Dad. Good game." And like it lifted my shoulders a little higher, right? And I started to like feel this identity of my son and how well he did in his baseball game. And I started to kind of like find my identity in him, right? And how well he did. Or vice versa. There's been games where he didn't do so good, and I've found identity in that too. And, afterwards I was driving home and I was like, man, that wasn't my game. I didn't, I had no part in his, how well he played in that baseball game. But I started to like feel like it was my game, and it was because of my coaching, or because I was, helping him out. And so I think there's a challenge and a struggle in that, specifically with men, in these identity pieces that we find that could have a real negative impact on our life, because I think we have so much focus on some of those, you know, money, business, titles, social media, followers, all these things that we find identity in. And I think it'd be really damaging. What do you think?
Yeah, man, I agree. And I feel a responsibility to speak life into the people that I love, into their lives, right? To speak truth and to speak life into them. And I think with that mindset, and the reason why that came to mind is so I'm in a similar boat. I coach Jake, his football team, and dude, there's like I love football. I love almost everything about it, right? I love the camaraderie. I love the team aspect. I love that no, yeah, you can have a great quarterback and they can take over a game, but I promise you, if nobody's blocking, the dude's never going to do anything, right? Like so you can have stars on a football team, but it is truly a team sport, right? Like you have to rely on the guy or gal to your right and to your left. Um, I love that aspect. I love how tough it is. I love how hard it is. I love that you know, especially in these younger kids. And I address it all the time. I love how aspects of it are so hard they start crying, right? And I'm always like, hey, dude, I don't care if you guys cry. I love it. Cry because you're pushing through it. You're crying and you're facing adversity, and that's an expression of it. But all of them continue to push through. They're continuing on. They're crying, but they're still playing. They're still doing the sprints, whatever they're doing. And so I love encouraging that aspect of it, right? Because I think it's a great life lesson. Like sometimes we just want to sit down and cry, but we have the next step. We have to take the next step to meet the objective, right? And so I love I love the game of football and I love coaching it. And then my son, he just has with a football body, right? Like Jake is just he's I mean, you know Jake, man, he's thick. You know, he's on the football field, he's become pretty athletic. And so I find myself being and I want to but saying what if, playing the what if game. What if he quits football? What if he's terrible at football, right? Like, what if these things happen? Do I still love kid? And so, how do I love him? And my daughter's the same; she's a great soccer player. But how do I love my kids? Noah also similar. He's probably the athlete in the family. But how do I love my kids outside of the context of this thing that of sports and athletics, which both my wife and I are passionate about? I mean, she owns a gym; like we're passionate about these things. But what if they're not interested in it? Do they see a difference in how I love them? Right? Do they sense and if we build an identity for them and we don't love them for who they are, or if there's bounds and there's limits to how much we love them based on their performance in certain things and the way I feel about it, we should just be honest about that necessity because I think we all can fall into that trap in a lot of different ways. But that's the powerful thing about identity is you have a choice and you have an opportunity to dig in and be like, who do I want to be? Do I want to be a dad who only loves a kid that's good at sports? Like, is that who you want to be? Of course not. Okay. Well, then let's just address that one thing. What kind of dad do I want to be? It's easier to define the kind of dad you want to be, or the parent you want to be, or the husband you want to be, and put action items against that thing. But most of us just don't do it, right? And intimacy month. So for me, you know, personally, my daughter's a teenager now. She's 13, and there's things, daughters, and I'm a dad, and there's certain aspects that there's challenges and there's rub and there's friction. And I had to step back and be like, am I the kind of dad that wants to catch my daughter doing things wrong? Is that who I want to be? Yes or no? No, of course not. Of course not. Well, then are my actions betraying that? Right? Why are my actions of a person who's kind of like looking around the corner? Oh, caught you again, instead of breathing life into my daughter specifically. And I that intimacy month really hit me in the face with that. Like, do I want to be intimate with my daughter? Yes. Do I want to love her in a way that she acknowledges and recognizes and gets life from her father's love and everything that that implies? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, then what do I got to do about it? Do I want to be a good friend? Do I want to be an intimate friend? How often am I saying no? How often am I pushing back? How often am I seeking to just do the things I want to do and not speaking life or breathing life into my friends, supporting them, loving them, honoring them, all that good stuff. And so I think you hit a great point because oftentimes if that's not checked or if you're not intentional about it or you don't even ask a question, we have the ability to live in these false identities. And dude, like think about it. Like think about that. I put my identity in my 7-year-old son. Like that's what defines who I am.
Yeah,
Like,
dude.
is that good? Is that honorable?
But how many men do it? How many of us do it?
Dude, parents get in fights at football fields. And I'm
Yep.
like, are you guys like, are you literally outside your mind?
Yep. I
Are
saw
you
I saw
outside your
that
mind?
I saw that at a jujitsu tournament that we went to like two dads literally like got up in their face, each other's face, and were like shoving, pushing over their 8-year-olds, in on the
How
jujitsu
stupid is
floor.
that, dude?
So
Like how,
stupid.
well, and even more stupid. I took Jake to a football game. He's a Ravens fan. It was a Ravens Browns game. So obviously rivalry. And he asked me like, why are these guys? Because guys are like fighting outside the stadium and
Yeah.
they're like yelling and cussing. And my son, my at the time he's probably 9. He's like, Dad, why are they so mad? And I'm like, Jake, because they're adult children. They're
Mm,
men that can't play in the NFL, and yet they're so wrapped up in the identity of a children's game that they're willing to risk everything, dude.
yeah.
Everything. Like literally, you hit a guy the wrong way and you permanently hurt him, or you whatever, dude, or your kid is there and he's watching his or she's watching their dad be a giant freaking turd bucket. And it's like, I'm risking everything. Why? Because my identity's so wrapped up in a game that I can't play at a high level and other dudes can and I want to fight somebody about it. Like that is the stupidest thing.
And you're
But
just
yet,
modeling. You're just modeling for your own
oh, you're
kids.
modeling it. And do you not want more for not only for yourself, but do you not want more for your family? Do you not want like if you ask anybody in a sane moment, hey man, do you want your kid to be so wrapped up in the identity of something else that he has no control over, she has no control over, and it's in literally a children's game that they can't control their emotions? Like, is that what you want? Of course not. That's crazy. Why would you say that? Well, because you just did. Like
Because you
you
just
just
did.
did. You just threw the remote at the TV because you got so mad about a football game. Like, really, dude? And I'm not suggesting it's not a big deal. Like Army Navy, big deal. I cried, but I'll continue to cry. Whatever. Like, it's a big deal, but it's also you have to contextualize it, right? It's actually not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
It's not. So, I think identity, but again, we're giving extreme examples, but they're not extreme examples. The problem is there are dads out there as their kids enter the kids enter high school and junior high and teenage years, preteen and puberty, there are dads out there that will lose relationships with their children because they're not proactive enough or self-aware enough or mature enough to desire something greater in a long-term relationship. And this is a phase of life where things start. It's easy when they're babies, right? And they do everything you tell them to do and you snuggle and you kiss and whatever. But when it gets challenging, if we've not refined our identity in these things, then we have a very real chance of losing the things that are most important to us. And then you work so hard to get them back when you never had to lose them in the first place, or you didn't have to lose them to the extent that you lost them. There's going to be certain change in the relationship, but you're the adult. You're the one that is secure in your identity. You have found little p purpose. Go listen to Jordan Grummett podcast. You found little p purpose enough that you can be fed abundantly and you can have your own identity and you can know it brings you joy. And I'll tell you the last kind of example I want to give. This is, and this, I think this will resonate with, I hope it resonates with, especially our veteran community, but anybody. We talked about this also when we talked about identity. We talked about, we talk about these things. There are choices in these. And one of the things that is most fascinating to me is when I hear people say things like, I hate my job. The military sucks. Oh, the Navy is the worst. And they've been in for like 25 years. And you're like, what?
What?
You've chosen. to do this for 25 years. There's no, but it is a 100% volunteer force. And even if it was a draft, it's not a 25-year draft. It's like
No.
you got 2 years mandatory service. Like it's not, you've made a choice for decades. Or even if you're not like a 4-year person or whatever, you made the choice to be at the place that you're at. And so I found it fascinating when I lived, especially overseas, some of the Americans that, whether they're service members, and I lived overseas in a different context in the past too, and people be like, I hate this place. I hate it. And they're mostly freaking Texans. Like, it's not Texas. I'm like, Texas is the worst. Why? Yes, Italy's not Texas. Why would you want it to be West
Uh,
Texas? Beautiful, way better than Rome. But it just was it's fascinating to me, and I challenge that. And so if that's you, right? There's ownership in that. There's ownership in that. And do you really hate it? And what struck me in yesterday's conversation is I think one of the most effective ways to counter cynicism and negativity, not I think this is proven, but we don't action it, is gratitude.
mm,
Make a list of the things you love and make a list of things you hate. And if the things you hate outweigh the things you love, then make another list and list all the ways it's your fault and the choices you made. And then do something about it, right?
and how to
Like
change it.
change it. Change it. Because nobody's holding you to this thing that you didn't choose or that you chose, right? Nobody, I mean, you chose it and you continue
Yeah.
to. Every time you reenlist, every time you take another set of orders as an officer, like you're making a choice. You don't have to. And so I think it's and today someone wrote a text and he's missing out on the bike ride. And he's like, but I'm choosing to be here. I chose to be here. I loved it, dude. I loved it. He just wrote that.
Yeah. Took
And
ownership
he's
of it.
like, this will make me better because I chose it. And so I think for us as we dive in identity, there's also a level of ownership that you have to exercise. And you should tell yourself, I chose this. And what's good about it? What do you think?
It's fantastic, man. I think that we were kind of joking about it at the beginning, but extreme ownership, taking ownership of your choices, taking ownership of who you are, who you're identifying as, and putting action items to that, right? Because you can make a lot of excuses. You can make a lot of you can do a lot of blame, right? You can blame others, you can blame outside circumstances. You can have this negative outlook towards things, but it's not gonna help. It's not gonna change anything, right? And there's a lot of people that are living in this like scarcity mindset world, victim mentality. Um, and at the end of the day, it does nothing for you. If anything, it makes it worse, right? So yeah, I love it, man. Take ownership, find and define these identities that you live in, not the false identities, but the real identity, the true values that you find, and then go take action on it and go do something about it. And if you don't like something about yourself, go make a change. Go make a
Yeah.
change.
Yeah. And if you're not willing to make a change, I'll give you a very personal example. Like I don't love that I'm sitting at, 230, 240. I don't love it. But I have completely owned, I'm like, dude, if I really cared that much, I'd do something about it. I would action it, right? Like I would. And so I used to be like, oh, I used to say things like, oh, I'm overweight, I'm bigger than I want to be, blah, blah, blah. And fortunately and unfortunately for me, about 90% of that's muscle weight. So
Mm, right.
so that's just what it is.
Yeah.
But actually that's physically impossible because water makes up whatever. Anyways, not important. Um, but
It's science.
those are things where I'm like, hey, dude, like stop whining about these things that are 1000% in your control. Like if you're late, people are like, I'm late. I'm always late. I run, dude. Then wake up earlier. Like you can do it, or go to bed earlier. Like there's a lot of things that, to your point, it's so much easier to blame something else than it is to take responsibility. And and the other thing, if you didn't listen to it, I would encourage everybody to go listen to the podcast, the most recent one with Jordan Grummett. But one of the things he said that just completely changed my outlook on things was when he described big purpose versus little purpose, big purpose being like a big audacious goal idea, and it's in its nature, it's scarce. when he talked about little p, he's like, dude, little p is infinite. It's abundant. You assign it. It's stuff that makes you tick, that you love, that you choose. It can literally be a billion things. I get purpose from being a dad. I get purpose from, fly fishing. I get purpose from being a friend. I get purpose in the Connect Man. I get purpose at what this, that, and the other. You can action small p purpose every single day, and it's abundant. It's never ending, potentially. You choose. And so I love not only the empowerment of that, but also that's where true meaning, identity, purpose can all be served. And it's not scarce. God didn't create David to be one thing, like a super handsome fanny pack model. Like that's not what God created me just to be that, right? That's just
I don't
one.
think God created you
I
to ever be
nobody can
that.
hear you. You go back on mute. But God, if you sit there and you think through what's my purpose, dude, that list can go for days, and it can be injected in every single conversation you have, right? And so I think there's just a ton of beauty and power in that, and I love how Jordan framed that because it gives me hope that I can constantly take steps forward in purpose. It's not a source of stress; it's a source of life, energy, and empowerment.
Love it, man. Well, on that note, you go have fun on your bike ride. Serve that little pea with all of our friends that I'm missing out on because I'm hurt.
Yeah, we'll
Give
miss you,
everybody a high
dude.
five for me. That little pea is creating a community that's really, really cool, and it's pretty purposeful and meaningful. So, it's a good conversation. I love it. Guys and gals, go be kinetic. Take some action.
Giddy up.
See
Take
ya.
action. No excuses.
No
Get
excuses.
some.
Bye.
See you. Thank you for listening to the Connect Man podcast. If you are growth minded, community focused, and willing to take uncommon action to redefine success and live an abundant life, visit our website at www.thekineticman.com to see all the ways we can connect.
Yeah, and on our website, you can find more information on everything we're doing, like joining our meetup page to get the details on our webinars and our local Thursday gatherings here in Colorado. From our site, you can also find more information on and sign up for the next Kinetic Man retreat and the next house of our mastermind group. Finally, we always appreciate your love and support. Please share this episode and go rate us on your favorite podcast player of choice.
Thank you again. Now go take uncommon action.